Welcome to How to Belong, the podcast that delves into the human quest to find a sense of belonging in what can often feel like a lonely world. Join us as we talk to guests who've navigated their own unique paths, what we like to call their hero journeys, from feeling like they don't fit in, to the profound realisation that true belonging can only ever be found from within. I'm Naomi E. Lloyd, and this is the How to Belong podcast. Hello and welcome back to How to Belong, the podcast that dives into the myriad of ways we find our place in the world. It's been an amazing season so far. We've explored belonging through the lenses of hearing loss, grief, perfectionism, the lessons that diamonds can teach us about uniqueness, sexual identity, and most recently with the brilliant BBC presenter John Cameron about ADHD. I'm learning a lot already, and I hope you are too, or if just helping in any way. But each journey has been really unique, and I find it's revealing how our sense of belonging, or lack thereof, it touches us at different points in our lives. And the more I explore these stories, the more I realise that belonging is a multifaceted experience, and I think it affects us in diverse and profound ways. But one area I've been really eager to delve into is music, and how it can serve as a powerful instrument, pun intended, in guiding us towards a sense of belonging. To me, music moves us in ways that are deeply personal, and it can actually connect us to communities and identities and shared experiences, which is why I'm thrilled to welcome Hannah Roper to the show. Hannah is not just a country music singer and the mastermind behind one of the UK's most popular country music festivals, Country on the Coast. She's also an entrepreneur and a speaker who has dedicated herself to empowering female creatives through her platform, Female Creative. But her journey is a testament to the transformative power of music, but it's also one of personal resilience. Hannah's story is one of incredible courage, and it's also one of reinvention. Got personal struggles with domestic abuse, to saying goodbye to her singing alter ego Lily Garland, and then going on to run a thriving music festival. She's navigated significant challenges with super determination, and all experiences that have shaped her unique perspective on belonging, identity, and community. So without further ado, I'm thrilled to welcome Hannah. Hannah, hello, it's fantastic to have you here. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me. I am good. I'm very excited to chat to you. I've been listening to previous episodes. I love what you're doing. And yeah, it's such an honour to be involved in this podcast. So thank you.
Well, I've been waiting to speak to you. I've been, this is going to sound a bit stalkerish now, but I've been coming to your music festival since it started back in 2016. Was it 2016?
2019, yes, 2019.
2019. I took it further back. And I've just always been a super fan in a way, because not only do I love country music, but I find it really inspiring when, you know, somebody comes up with an idea that can seem so big, but you just go ahead and do it and make it happen. And it makes a huge difference. People travel from all over the country to come to your festival, and it's a date in their diary every year, and that in itself is something that you've created a community, and I think that is super admirable. So personal thank you from me for doing that. But we'll get back into the festival a bit later on. But I'd like to sort of start by just finding out a little bit about you and your connection to music. And if you don't mind me asking, how it might have shaped your sense of belonging and your sense of self and your background with that.
So now my genre is country music. That's kind of how we've connected. That is what I do, what I listen to, what I'm part of. But it hasn't always been that way. Growing up, my parents had a very eclectic music taste. One minute we would be listening to Diana Ross, the next minute it would be Roy Orbison, then it would be the Beatles. My mum was very much involved in the local amateur dramatic scene, so she played a lot of musical theatre soundtracks. We went and saw shows. She was in shows. I was backstage at shows. And then when I was old enough, at the age of 5, I was then in shows myself. So I've had a real mixed background when it comes to music, but music has always been the consistent thread, right from being a small child into, my teenage years. I did music GCSE, I did music A-level, I went and studied music at university where we had to touch on every single genre. But it was not only when I came across country music in its modern format now, which was when I first saw the Chicks, formerly known as the Dixie Chicks. I saw them in Austin, Texas back in 2000. And so that was a real kind of pivotal moment for me in terms of that genre. But it was when I started singing it myself about 10 years ago, that's when that sense of belonging really started to almost like come into my periphery, come into that stage, because as I said, I've performed for such a long time, since I was 5 years old, maybe even slightly beforehand. But I've always been slightly different. I've always had a slightly different voice that was, not quite perfect enough for some of the lead musical theatre roles. It was too fancy for other things. I was classically trained. I mean, gosh, the amount of times I had to sing in French and Italian and I had no idea what I was singing. And I was capable, but none of that felt like home. None of that felt like that was my genre until I started singing country music and had people around me saying, well, that really suits your voice. That really suits you. It suits your style. I've sung in choirs and been told, you're singing a little bit differently, sing straighter, sing more as part of the group. And it's always been so difficult for me. So I think that genre of country music is not then for me just about the community that you mentioned, which I know we'll talk about more in a little bit more detail, but that was exactly what I wanted to create with Country on the Coast, was that sense of community and that sense of belonging, finding your place where maybe you didn't quite fit before. But also for me personally, it's about my voice and my not my ability to sing, but almost the nuances, the inflections in my voice, the sound of it. That's where it really seemed to belong.
I love the fact that you talked then about when you felt like you'd come home when you started singing in that way. I mean, that's fascinating to me. I really can't. I wish I could sing. It's one of the, if you could give me a wish list, give me a talent that I wish I had, it would be singing. So, and it's just never going to happen. But I find that fascinating that it was already inside of you. This particular way, your voice, your singing voice, and it was waiting to come out. And this might sound a little bit far-fetched, but I'm just going to, and I hadn't rehearsed asking you this, I'm just going to try. But I heard somebody talk about it on the radio, and another thing, I forget the name, and they were saying that it's almost as though when they started singing in the right genre, it was like they'd connected to a previous life. Does that a previous?
I've heard people talk. Yeah, I've heard people talk about that, and I mean, I was brought up Catholic, very heavily Catholic, but as a result, because of what was then at school and around me, I don't necessarily have the same religious beliefs. I believe something. I believe that it's not as simple as people are just born, you have your life and you die and that's it. I think it's, especially with the country music genre, it is a way of life. You hear people talking about it being a way of life. Now, let's be honest, I live in a very middle-class area just outside of Portsmouth. I haven't got a horse. I don't walk around in a cowboy hat the entire time. Now, if it was a little bit more socially acceptable, probably would.
I would too, absolutely.
My lifestyle isn't what you would describe as country. However, I do connect on a much deeper level elements of a country lifestyle. Like if I could magic myself somewhere, if I won the lottery and could design my environment, I would be living on a farm. I would be riding a horse all the time. I would be covered in hay and dirt and wearing boots even in the summer. In fact, I've just ordered myself a new pair of boots and I'm so excited because they arrived today.
Can you send me the link?
I will do. So I think there is an element of of that connection of things that we don't quite understand, that whole past life element, the spirituality, the reincarnation, yeah, there's something there. There's always a reason. We don't always know what the reason is, and we don't always understand it because it's really kind of far out there, and especially with our modern society and science and having to be really specific and there's this answer or there's that answer. But I think there's something in there. I've never thought about it in that way, but I've just finished watching Yellowstone. I'm now on 1883, and I can picture myself there. I can picture myself in that sort of environment. I was just never physically born there in this lifetime.
You have just said everything that I feel, 100%. It's so bizarre because you're right. I grew up in Yorkshire, and I now live in Portsmouth, near to where you do. Neither of those places are like Yellowstone or like Nashville or any of those places, and yet you're right. There's something connecting there, and this is the genre that we're talking about, but I'm sure it must apply to people differently according to different genres. Like I remember a Christmas party last year. One of the guests there has very long hair and was wearing a metal t-shirt. And I immediately sort of said, I started talking to him about that genre because my husband absolutely loves it. And I could identify him. I knew what his music was straight away. In fact, I don't think I say that. I wasn't wearing a metal t-shirt. It was just, I could just tell by the way he dressed and everything else. And he said something to me that stuck with me since then, that he said, did you know that people who love metal are apparently some of the happiest people in the world? I don't know where the stat came from. And I went, that's interesting.
Wow.
Why do you say that? And he said, because we've got an immediate community. We've got an immediate identity. So, you walked up, he said to me, you walked up to me and you knew straight away what my music taste was. And it's a really strong sense of belonging that comes from that. And it stuck with me because I thought, but I have that when I go to your country music festival. When I walk into the room every year, and there's hay bales and American flags, and there's those little cards that you always have on the table saying what the Jack Daniel's cocktails are. I'm like, yes, I'm here.
I'm home.
I'm home, and I'm not home. I've just walked across the road from my own house onto the pier in Southsea. I'm not. I am home, but I'm in a different. I've just kind of like transported to another version that actually makes more sense to me, and it's very interesting. It's a bit woo-woo, but I don't think there's anything wrong with exploring that. Okay, so we've mentioned. I've already started talking about the country music festival, and hopefully given a little bit of an idea of what that feels like. So I know that you've managed to connect with artists from Nashville and Texas and actually Sweden, country artists all over the world, and that come every year. I'd love to hear about your experience of working with people from different nationalities and cultures, but that you have this one thing in common. Does that bring sort of a sense of belonging there together when you come together like that? Because that one thing that ties you all together.
I think it does. And I've been so privileged by having this idea, running with it a little bit like a crazy person and going, right, this sounds like a great idea. Let's do it. No idea what I'm doing, but we'll figure it out along the way, which is kind of the story of my life, really. And it has grown into this opportunity where I connect with people all over the world. Earlier on this week, I was having a conversation with a Nashville artist who wants to come over to the UK specifically to centre her tour around the festival. And to me, that's mind-blowing. I am a North End girl. So for anyone that's not local to Portsmouth, Portsmouth is split into almost like little sub-districts. So I'm a North End girl. I'm a Pompey girl, born and bred, born at St Mary's. And here I am having conversations with independent artists. Now, these aren't artists that are signed to big record labels, but that is a conversation for another day, because a lot of those big record labels are actually losing artists because they want to be independent. So just because they're independent and they're running their own career doesn't mean the quality of what they produce is any less. So these are world-class touring artists that sell out shows in their own country or even internationally. And I'm having these conversations with them. And it starts through the country music. But what you find is there are often quite a lot of commonalities with people who like country music. We tend to dress similarly. We tend to love animals. We tend to use the same sort of language, regardless of where in the world you've come from, because we've been so heavily influenced by song lyrics and the poetry and the language that is within the genre. We also then have a connection around just that pleasure that comes about through listening to this different type of music. So even though we may have grown up in different places, different countries, they may have grown up in a more country style environment than I have, especially coming from America. But you mentioned Sweden. Sweden's got a huge country scene, and this artist that I was talking to earlier on in the week, she sells out shows in Scandinavia because they love country music. Australia has a huge country music scene. I've interviewed a few Australian artists, and again, they're at the other side of the world, and their country looks a bit different to American country, UK country. But again, we can straight away connect and have those conversations because there are those commonalities. We want music to make us feel a certain way, and we want to get that feeling out to audiences. So they're doing that through performing, which is how I used to do it, but now I'm doing that by providing a platform for them to get to know a wider audience, either through the festival or through hosting the country music show on Express FM. And I think it's a really interesting question. It's a really interesting thing to dive into, because what you touched on a moment ago, and I wonder if the listeners kind of twigged and thought, hang on a second, you talked about the Country Music Festival, you talked about coming in and having the hay bales and Jack Daniels, and then you mentioned the word pier. Now, who would put a country music festival on a pier on the sea? You don't think those two things go together, but there are certain elements of that, like the style of the music, the decoration, the use of flags, the use of hay bales, the particular brand of drink, the particular style of food, the types of traders we have. So again, although you wouldn't put country music together with a pier, we still create that environment, and we still create that feeling, and we still create that sense of belonging. So it's almost like those little elements, those little bits of the jigsaw puzzle that make up the genre, that as soon as you start bringing those together, people go, oh yeah, we're connected. We're best buddies. I talk to people that I've never met in real life, and I see them in real life, and they embrace me like I'm a long lost relative or a friend from college that they haven't seen in 10 years. And that, I think, is magical. And that's where the sense of belonging comes about. And that is something that I only really started to experience when I started doing Country on the Coast and doing the radio show. I wouldn't say I necessarily experienced it as a singer-songwriter, because although we're talking about the country music genre and we're saying we've got all these connections, I think as with any genre, especially something like country music is so diverse. You can have your old school bluegrass or your Willie Nelson, you've then got your Dolly Parton, but the way that it's evolved is then you've got the likes of Morgan Wallen, you've got Carrie Underwood, you've got Miranda Lambert, you've got the Chicks, you've got Tiger Lily Gold, you've got Post Malone now, having literally, I think it's released at the time of recording, today his new album's come out, and it's being described as so country, but you would never put some of these people in. Beyonce's just released a country album. Very interesting how the world is receiving Beyonce as a non-country music singer-songwriter coming into the country genre as a female, compared to the likes of Jelly Roll and Post Malone and Machine Gun Kelly as male other genres coming into the country music genre. It's really interesting. It's something that I've kind of got my eye on, which again links to that sense of belonging, and almost where I'm going with this is, because the genre is so wide, at times, and especially as a singer-songwriter, and especially 10 years ago, I was coming in as pop country, rock country. I was described once as the country music version of Tina Turner. performing to
Fantastic.
me is how you bring that, that's how I was bringing my message across. I wasn't somebody who stood at a microphone with a guitar. That wasn't my brand. My brand was the big performances, the stomping around the stage, the photographs that people have caught of me over the years, that it's like the many faces of Hannah when I'm kind of singing. But the genre itself actually can feel a little bit divisive sometimes, which is why I started the Country Music Festival, because I wanted it to be inclusive. I wanted everyone to come in, and even if they're like old school country, if they're like country rap, if they like country rock, if they like country pop, let's pull together the commonalities that make it country, and let's embrace those. Let's talk about those. Let's be part of that, rather than, oh, that's too poppy, and oh, that's not quite. And what do you mean country? What is Sam Hunt doing? What do you mean he's bringing in some country rap? And that's where I think the space that I wanted to create and that I want to be part of is about, it doesn't matter what style of country you like. It doesn't matter if you want to wear a Stetson or you want to wear a trucker hat. Actually, the vibe is still the same. We're still doing it for the same reason, and we still want to have that sense of belonging. So although it is a very inclusive genre at times, it can be divisive by people saying you're not country enough, which is why I think in the UK we've got the space to create our own version, which is what Australia has done. And Keith Urban gets so much stick for a slightly different take on country, but that's theirs. That's their Australian country. Scandinavian country have got their slight twist on it. Let's do that here. Let's create our own community and create our own sense of belonging, because that's what we have the power to do, right?
But it's so interesting. I mean, I could just listen to you all day talking about this, but what I'm picking up on as well is we keep coming back to the word community. And isn't it interesting? It's human nature, isn't it? We start with something. We start with a community, and then it becomes popular, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And as soon as that happens, people will make factions within those communities, because that's human nature to do that. And then you can get the complexities with it. As something gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But what I love about what you're saying is get back to the values, and let people have that space, because let's face it, other genres are huge and have so many different multi elements to them as well. Pop, for example, and rock. You've got hard rock, classic rock, metal rock. But yeah, most people who like rock, unless it's very, very heavy and gone too far, will go somewhere and still understand when they walk into a room there are certain ways that people dress and certain ways. It's complicated. It's a complicated one, because it's the only place I think that I, from a dress sense and from an environment sense, that I've ever felt I fit in. And it's not that, it hasn't as a rule been somewhere that I've been easy to tap into until recently. Thanks to Hannah Roper bringing it right on my doorstep.
I mean, you're welcome. But I think that's it. And, the clothing really does play a part in that. I went to, there's a new festival started up in Southampton, and I wanted to go and support, because again, on the South Coast we have very limited opportunities to go and be in that country music environment. And the audiences that were at this particular festival were a real mix, because there were original artists and there were cover bands on, and the vast majority of people that wanted to be there wanted to have a good time. They've probably come into the genre a little bit later on in life through the growing popularity, through it being played more in mainstream. I mean, I was chatting at the radio station the other morning with one of the daytime presenters who is also a huge country music fan and has been for forever. But he was saying never in his radio life did he think that there would be so much country music played on mainstream radio, that as part of the morning shows, the breakfast shows, the drive time, these tunes are on the main playlists, whereas before they would have just been on specialist shows like mine, where I have the freedom to play all of these almost subgenres of country and bring that to the audiences. So I think because of that rise of popularity, more people are realising that country music has so much about it and is fun and is enjoyable and brings that party spirit, but also allows you to connect on another level. Now, when I went to that festival, I didn't stand there and go, well, hang on a second, they've got a really, that's a imitation cowboy hat. That's a pink cowboy hat. That one's got weird gems on it or tassels. You don't stand there and go, oh, you're not really country. It's like, do you know what? This is such an amazing genre of music, and it connects the lyrics that are in country music songs. I've always said it's the closest thing to musical theatre, but for real life. Musical theatre is always about playing a part. It's about being a character. It's about telling somebody else's story. Country music does that and tells our own stories. And I interview a lot of country music artists, and one of the questions I ask them is, what song do you wish you had written? And I ask that because so often somebody else will write a song, but they've written it in a way that the lyrics, and you think, oh my gosh, have they just opened up my head and emptied out my thoughts?
Yeah.
Because that is so accurate. And you don't even have to be a singer-songwriter to think like that. You can hear these country music songs. So I think with it, it is, you can come into it at any point. It isn't about saying, well, you're not country enough, or you are not this kind of country. Like you said, with rock, hard rock, soft rock, this rock, that glam rock, all of it has got slight nuances, but there are commonalities, and they're the things that we need to hang on to, because they're the things that are going to give us that sense of belonging. And that might come through, going to a country event and that being the only place that you feel comfortable to wear a Western style hat because of societal expectations. Now, if we lived up in Montana, then we'd be wearing them all the time, and we'd be, odd if we weren't wearing a hat like that all the time. But because of societal expectations, there is still that restriction mentally and not wanting to stand out too much. But if you can come to that space and you can wear that T-shirt, or you can wear boots that you would not normally wear to work or whatever, that I think helps give you a sense of identity and a sense of belonging. Like at the moment, especially in this weather, I am living in denim shorts and country style T-shirts. This one actually is a piece of merch from an independent UK country artist created by an amazing UK based country western clothing brand. But it makes me feel like I belong. It makes me feel like this is part of my identity, and country music gives me that space to express that.
What's the name of the brand, just so that we can let other people know?
Binks and Bow. You definitely need to go and check her out. Her T-shirts are amazing. I've got hats, I've got T-shirts. She started to collaborate with some independent country music artists. So this is a Harley Moon Kemp T-shirt. And Harley Moon Kemp is a fantastic example of finding the genre and finally finding that she belongs in that genre. She is the daughter of Martin Kemp. She's the sister of Roman Kemp. And she's in this genre. And she's had quite a bit of stick of, well, why is she jumping on the country bandwagon? Well, what people don't know, she's been songwriting for years, and that her style of songwriting never quite felt like it fit until she went on a songwriting camp in Nashville, and suddenly everything fell into place. So it doesn't matter if you find your place at the age of 5, at the age of 15, or at the age of 55. If you find that, you should grab it with both hands, and people should welcome you in with open arms if it's a true community.
Well, I haven't told you this yet, but I have just recently booked with my husband next year to go to Nashville. So I'll be going to that store. I'm very excited. And you know what? And I found all these groups on Facebook about Nashville groups about giving advice, and I already feel like, I've tapped into all these people, and they're all talking in this language that I understand, or that makes sense, even though I think I visited there once for like a day on a Greyhound trip years ago. So no, I absolutely can't wait. So all of this is just literally music to my ears. I know that's a cheesy thing to say, but the lyrics thing. I've heard this expression before, that my husband loves listening to the music, and I love listening to the lyrics. And I know the two things go together, but I've heard it said before, if you love listening to the music itself, you're a musician, but if it's the lyrics, you're a poet. I'm definitely more of a poet in that sense, because I would, particularly when I can't hear all the lyrics. When back in the day when we had CDs, I used to pull out the sleeves and just memorize all the lyrics, because I couldn't always hear them as well. and obviously now you're on Spotify, you can go down and follow the lyrics underneath. So I think I absolutely love doing that, and I love the fact that Dolly Parton refers to herself as a song teller, not just a storyteller, but a song teller. Now, I would love to know, is there a song that really speaks to you in terms of your life, or, like you said, somebody's just gone into your head and pulled it all out? Is there one that stands out, or are there too many?
There are a lot. And I think, again, that's just because country music is such a storytelling genre. But one of the songs that's always stuck out from the moment I heard it, it's Miranda Lambert's, oh my gosh, the title's gone out, House That Built Me.
Oh,
Miranda Lambert, House That Built Me. Now, I've had that in my set. I've sung that myself before. I've listened to it so many times. It doesn't matter how many times, it makes the hair stand up on my arms, and I get like a chill down the back of my neck. And it's one of those songs, and the whole premise of it is she is going back to her childhood home. Somebody else lives there now. She's gone back to that childhood home, and she's seeing almost the elements of her life that got her to where she is today. And I think it's so poetic. It's not just about the literal words that she's saying. It's about the feeling that it evokes of almost, we're such complicated human beings. And we all start our journey in places that we made no choice over. We're born into families. We go to, we have everything chosen for us as children. And then as we become teenagers and early adults and then into adulthood, we start making our own choices, and we start being a little bit more directive over our own journey. But even then, there are external influences, there's societal influences, there's situations that we might get into that we might not have chosen, but we've ended up in them, and then you have to then work out where you go from there. So a song like The House That Built Me is just so, for me, collective of all of those things, that there are going to be almost footprints that throughout your life journey, there's going to be touch points, footprints that you've left in various places, that when you go back to that, it evokes a memory, it evokes a feeling that is part of your journey. And the melody is beautiful. And it's really interesting what you've said about, if you listen to the music, you're a musician. If you listen to the lyrics, you're a poet. I am in a bit of a unique position because I listen to both, not at the same time. And that's because of my years and years and years of music training, that sometimes I will tune into the music and I will recognise the patterns in the melody and the reoccurring themes and the instrumentation. And that's not just in country music, that's in everything. And I kind of tune into that and I don't hear the lyrics. But that's because that melody is so beautifully put together that's the thing that kind of grabs my attention. Other times I will be listening to the lyrics because it's telling a story. And especially with country music, yes, there's repetition because there's always a formula. And country music is written truly is very simple. I always used to say it's 3 chords and the truth. And that's it. The melodies are quite simple. If you want something to sound really country, you keep your melodies super, super simple because the emphasis is on the words and it's on the story. So you have to listen to the songs from start to finish because each verse is moving you on in the story. And that's what something like The House That Built Me does. Although the chorus is repetitive, each verse takes you on another step of that journey. So yeah, that's a very long-winded way of saying, yes, The House That Built Me by Miranda Lambert is just one of those that I wish I'd written myself. And then another one is Carrie Underwood, Church Bells. And not necessarily because I've had exactly the same experience. I've not committed murder. Just want to put that out there. But again, just the way that story evolves, the artistry behind putting that story together and how that moves on. That is one of the songs I wish I'd written that. I'd also be very rich if I'd written that song.
Of course. Well, I love the story behind, your reasoning behind both of those. And I love talking about lyrics in general. Miranda Lambert is one that I often come back to because I discovered a song that she'd written with her ex-husband Blake Shelton, Over You. Do you know that one? Over You?
I've heard it, yes.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure I could play it now. I have to be in the right place. It's about losing somebody through grief, and I think it was actually written about Blake Shelton's brother who died as a teenager. And but I sometimes I used that song when I needed to just go in my own space and just cry, and I find that very releasing and helpful. But it's got a place for me where I can't always listen to it, but it's helpful and therapeutic and healing. So some people think that I think my husband thinks, why would you do that to yourself? But we all approach things differently. But I might choose to do that because it's speaking to me and it's telling, like, and you say you're taken through this story from start to finish, which is wonderful and connecting and all those things. Sort of talking about grief and songs, it's something that very quickly becomes a huge thing when somebody's dealing with grief, particularly because it's something that you may need to pick out for, a funeral. Do you think this is where something like somebody who has a connection with music, this is where it can really all come to the forefront? That more so than others, if you are very music minded, if you're dealing with grief at that time. I wonder what your thoughts were on that.
I think so, and I think especially, I know we are predominantly talking about the country music genre, but that's because it's so close to both of our hearts. But the country music genre has a song for every single occasion. So if you are going through something in your life, someone has written a song that you will listen to it and you think that they've just taken the words right out of your head. It was through grief and music that I discovered my voice suited the country music genre. So I had lost my grandfather, and you and I have not ever spoken about this before.
No, I'm sorry.
But it's I lost my grandfather. So I'd gone through a very, very traumatic experience through the breakdown of my relationship. I had been subjected to domestic abuse, as you kind of mentioned in the intro. I was in a position where I'd completely lost myself. I didn't, who I am now and what you see now it's like a whole other person compared to who I was 10 years ago. And I was going through almost an element of grief there, of grieving what I thought life would look like.
Yeah.
Having then made a decision that I knew was the right decision to make. And I knew I had to do it for mine and my son's mental health, physical health, just to enable us to have a fulfilled life. So there was an element of grief that I was going through there. I then lost my grandfather, who had reached the age of 99. So had obviously been in my life for such a
long time,
not just in childhood, but through my teenage years, through my adulthood, through everything that I had been through becoming a mum, all of those really pivotal moments in a person's life. My grandfather was there, and he was the last remaining grandparent that I had. Now, when I lost my previous grandparents, I was a lot younger. I was a singer. I actually sung at their funerals. I now have no idea how I did that, but I would sing live. I sang things like, Bette Midler's "Wind Beneath My Wings."
Wow.
So not really country songs, but things like that. But I hadn't experienced what I had just recently experienced. I hadn't opened that emotional grief, loss, trauma bucket at that box at that point. So all of that had been open. My grandfather passed away. And my mum had always said, I want you to sing at his funeral. He wanted me to sing at his funeral. Everyone wanted me to sing at his funeral. And I thought, I can't do it. There's no way I would get through the first word. And they wanted me to sing "Over the Rainbow," which obviously is not a country song. So they wanted me to sing "Over the Rainbow." So there's no way I can't stand in front of all of these people with the grief that I'd just been going through, the breakdown of my relationship and the start of my journey to recovering from abuse, to then the grief of me losing my grandparent, but more importantly, seeing my mum go through the grief of losing her parent, who she was so close to and had been caring for him for so many years. So I found the Faith Hill version of Over the Rainbow. And I don't know if you've ever heard it. It's just, I mean, Over the Rainbow as a song is a beautiful song. Eva Cassidy really brought it out of the musical theatre genre and into the more pop genre.
Yeah.
And it was stunning, absolutely stunning version. Faith Hill's version is equally as stunning, more simple, but equally as stunning. So I went into a recording studio, I recorded that to then play at the funeral and send over to family over in America, because he had a daughter who lived in Dallas and her children lived in Austin, Texas, hence the fact that I'd had that connection with Austin kind of when I was younger, when I was a late teen. So I did that, and I then thought, well, I had some real therapy out of doing this. I had some real cathartic release through being in the studio with no one else really apart from the producer around, singing this song my way in this country style genre. I'll do another song. So I did another one, and I did another one. And then I realised that I had an opportunity to use lyric writing and songwriting as a way to process my grief through the breakdown of my relationship, but also as a bit of a therapeutic outlet for what I had experienced. So it was through my grandfather's funeral and recording Over the Rainbow that it opened up the opportunity for me to start to share some of these lyrics. And I had notebooks full of lyrics. Anytime I am in a really emotional point in my life, I will write it out as a song. So I started to take those and I started to work with some musicians and just kind of putting down some chord patterns. And because although I am a musician, I was a clarinetist. You can't play clarinet and write a piece of country music at the same time. It just doesn't kind of work out. So I had guitarists and things like that. So I started to kind of work. And that's then how Lily Garland was born, because it was me putting my experiences and my trauma and my emotions into a safe space, into this song, not necessarily with the intention of doing anything with it. Until people started to hear it, the studio started to play it to other people. I'd play it to family, and more than just my mum, because my mum would tell me that anything was great. But I started to kind of put it out. And then I realised that these song lyrics that I had written through my experiences with a country twist were connecting with other people. And that's how Lily Garland was born, and that's how I started releasing music and how I started touring and performing with my music, which then obviously led to the Country Music Festival and kind of where we are today. So it was using music through grief and connecting, and through two different types of grief, that almost started my next chapter. And interestingly, that was what one of my EPs was called, was The Next Chapter.
Well, it's a brilliant title. I did not know that story, and I'm just sitting here taking it all in. And thank you so much for sharing that. And what an impossible thing to do, stand at a funeral of somebody you are grieving to that extent. So what a great idea to go and record it. I think that's. I was thinking, oh, please say she recorded it, and you did. That's brilliant. You've touched on Lily Garland, and you've touched on the traumatic relationship. I don't want to pry too much, but I know we've spoken about it a little bit in the past. I wondered if you'd be happy to share a little bit of that story for our listeners, to sort of explain how there's a process of sometimes channeling this emotion and then letting go. And it's something you explained to me when I was experiencing something, and it was really helpful. So I wondered if you could share it with our listeners, and I'm sure it'd be helpful for them too.
It was something that I really feel really passionate about, actually, that sometimes you have to give yourself a little bit of a helping hand. And what I mean by that is, I embarked on a relationship in my early to mid-20s. It was the first proper relationship I'd ever had. It was very intense, very, very quickly. And that went on for 8 years or so. I became a mother in that time. But during that relationship, I was with somebody who, through their own trauma, through their own issues, behaved in a way that was very, very destructive and very, very toxic. And the result of that was that dripping tap effect of me losing my identity, losing my sense of belonging, losing my self-confidence, my self-belief. I would describe myself in that period of time as existing rather than living. I was going through day by day. I had a lot of fear in me. I had a lot of fear chemicals, the physiological almost impact that your body takes on when you are in a fight or flight kind of response, in a heightened sense of anxiety, constantly questioning not only everything you say, but everything you do, your facial expressions, your body language. And that is incredibly destructive to kind of be in that environment. And so I had thought about leaving and planned to leave multiple times, but it's so much easier said than done. And actually, the day that I left was not a planned occurrence as such. I walked out of my house. I left everything behind. I took my son. I didn't even have a toothbrush, didn't even have change of clothes for us. It was I left the house, and at that moment in time, I thought, I know I can't ever go back, because I don't know how my life is going to end up if I go back into that situation. And that wasn't the end of the trauma. I went through with my son an incredibly traumatic few years of almost trying to rebuild my life, but still being subjected to verbal abuse, coercive control. I had to second guess every single decision I made. I had to think about everything that I said in every aspect of my life, just in case it would be used against me or twisted. So I didn't know who I was then. And having then gone through that experience with losing my grandfather, recording the song, going into recording and writing my own music, at that particular point in time, I was in the police. I was part of Hampshire Constabulary. Social media was not as big as it is now, but it was still, it's fairly still, everyone was using it. And as a police officer, I knew that I couldn't be publicly on social media as a singer-songwriter under the same name, because we'd have, solicitors would look you up, courts would, you put anything out there on the internet, you've got to expect people to be able to find it. So I talked in the studio and I talked about creating a brand. I talked about creating an alter ego. And initially it started off just purely around that identity of not having my name on social media and using another name. And something that people might not know about me is, growing up Catholic, you get given a lot of names. I was born with quite a few names because my dad didn't have a middle name, although I think he gave himself a middle name. But as a result, he then gave my sister and I extra middle names. And then when you have your baptism, you have your first Holy Communion, you have your confirmation, you take on another name. Now, as part of my birth names, Garland was one of them. And that is because it is a surname which comes from a family member. And then for my confirmation, you have to choose a name. And I chose the name Lillian, who was my paternal grandfather's mother, who died when he was very, very young. He was brought up by his sisters. And I chose that as my confirmation name. So as I'm sat there thinking about names, I think it's got to mean something. It's got to have some connection. So I thought, well, Garland is a great second name. Yeah. And if I shorten Lillian to Lily, I've got Lily Garland, which is a country-esque feel name to it. So I became Lily Garland. What I didn't realise is at that particular time I was creating a character to help me survive. I was creating an alter ego and a cloak for myself to wear, to be able to redefine who I was, to be able to try and find that sense of belonging, but with an element of protection. So I was doing this, and I was very confident on stage. I had the showmanship. I had the experience. I've been around music all my life. I've been on stage since I was 5 years old. That's what people saw. What people didn't see was behind the scenes, is that I was still dealing with this emotional trauma and this coercive control, and going through legal systems and family court and all sorts of things. But being Lily Garland allowed me that sense of release. It allowed me that space to, and I hate the phrase fake it till you make it, but there was an element of that, not in an inauthentic way, in a survival way. It enabled me to connect with other people. It enabled me to have a sense of belonging, which wasn't a genuine sense of belonging, but it was what I needed in that moment. So as kind of time moved on, and I had created the Country Music Festival and all of that, originally I was still very much visible as Lily Garland. I met my now husband. I started another chapter of my life with a new relationship, with a new marriage. I left the police. I joined another corporate company. I thought life was great. I thought everything had fallen into place. And then COVID struck, a pandemic hit, and everything stopped. I was put on furlough. I couldn't perform anymore. The country music festival stopped. And what I then realised in that moment is that Lily Garland had been that protection. It had been that shield. And with that taken away, I didn't know who I was again. I felt back in that position of not knowing who I was. So again, I started to rebuild. I started to try and find communities. And there's a whole kind of story in that about how the female creative was born and the kind of that aspect of it. But it was only when I received an award. I was the recipient for the Pomodzi Inspirational Women of Portsmouth Award in the business category. And that was 2022, I want to say. And that was awarded to Hannah. I'd won awards as Lily Garland. I'd been nominated for awards as Lily Garland, but this was my first recognition as Hannah. And my acceptance speech is online somewhere, and it's ridiculous because I literally am bawling my eyes all the way through. But it was in that moment of realization of this is me, to quote the Greatest Showman. Which, this is who I am in my flaws, in my successes, in my journey, in still not having it all figured out. I'm being seen. And that was the first time that I'd ever felt like that. So I then kind of went down that pathway. But how this links into then the question that you asked is I left Lily Garland behind. I left those songs behind. And so often, even now, I get, well, when's Lily Garland coming back? When are you releasing new music? And for a while, it's like, oh, no, I'm just so busy and I'm doing all these things and life is amazing and it's just so busy. But the reality is I didn't connect with her in the same way. And I felt like that was a period in my life which was so traumatic and that was filled with so much emotion. And now I have different emotions and I have different experiences that I didn't feel that same connection. So it felt opening up some wounds if I brought Lily Garland back. And I think then how that then came out in our conversation was sometimes it's okay to leave those things behind because they are a part of your life that you can honour and you can respect and you can say that was a huge part of my journey and that enabled me to be where I am today, but I don't have to hold on to that. I can let that go because part of my recovery is being able to do that, being able to say that was then, and I have to let that go, and this is now, and this is going to look different, and that's okay. And people might not understand it, but that's okay as well, because you don't owe anyone an explanation. And I think that's really powerful. When I realised that, I felt so in control. I felt empowered. And that, again, helped my sense of belonging.
Well, you just said the word empowered, and it was just in my head as I was hearing you talking, because when I had that conversation with you a few months ago, and I was feeling like I hadn't finished something, and I was punishing myself almost for it, and it felt like you gave me the permission to say it's okay, it's okay because it's connected to another part of your life, and it's okay. And I found that so helpful. I absolutely know that you. Thank you for sharing that story. I know you will have helped people hearing that, because I think it's a bit like that economic concept of sunk loss. When you pour so much into something that people, even though they can see that it's no longer serving the purpose, or it's not going in the direction they want or thought they would, or if that's a dream or a job or anything else, because you put so much time, effort, energy, potentially money into it, you plow on anyway, regardless, punishing yourself, beating yourself up to do it, even though. And then that's why it's called a sunk loss, because actually you're just going to carry on pouring more and more into it, and it's just going to sink and sink and sink, rather than having that empowerment. And that's a really big word, but it's so connected to belonging. And I'm not quite there yet, and I'm very open about that in this podcast. It's all about my journey. And you even said to me a while back as well about journey. You say it's a shame that you think that word has been given a bad reputation almost, hasn't it? But actually things are
Yeah.
journeys, and we should bring it back and empower the word journey. What do you think about that?
I absolutely agree. I think even the word empowerment, I think the word journey, I think because of social media, I think because of the world of influencers, and they, everything has a place. I love social media, and I am very often influenced by people. But because of that movement, especially around the pandemic, a lot of those words, I think, lost their meaning. And I think that is such a shame, because we are all on a journey. Every single day we're on a journey, and that might be to do with your work, it might be to do with a family, it might be to do with your sense of self-discovery. I am 42, nearly 43 years old, and it's only now that I am starting to know myself and know what I want, what my boundaries are, the boundaries that I want to put in place for other people, and what I want life to look like. And I think we are all on a journey to get to a point of equilibrium. And I think it's really interesting then what you're talking about in that kind of theory of people plowing so much. And like you say, it doesn't have to just be financial. You could be plowing so much energy, so much effort, so much love, so much time and attention into something. And because of this very old-fashioned notion of success and failure, that if something is not working out, it is a failure. And people have tried to put a positive spin on that and, say failure is part of your journey and you have to fail to be able to get back up. And I get that, and I get where they're coming from. I refuse to look at things as a failure, because it doesn't serve me. I look at things as having that control and having that empowerment to say, this was what I was doing. That's not serving me anymore. That's not working for me anymore. But I've learned all these things from doing that I'm now going to pivot. I'm now going to flex, and I'm going to change direction. And I'm not seeing that as a failure, because had I have not done that first thing, I would never even have had this latest idea, or I would never have, gone down that path, or I wouldn't have met that person, or I wouldn't have been in that situation. So I refuse to look at things as failure. And that is a very personal thing to me. That is part of my recovery, because I spent years beating myself up that I had failed at being a partner, failed at being a mother. I'd chosen the wrong person. I had put myself in a situation, I was putting it all on me, and I was being a failure in my head. And that was so unhealthy and internally destructive that I, through help and therapy and, really reflecting and sitting with myself, is I decided to reframe that. So I personally don't believe in failure. I believe that you change direction. I believe that we are so multifaceted, which is why I love it when you have conversations about diamonds and like the inflections and the birthmarks and stones being in stones, and tell I've listened to the podcast episode. All of that.
Thank you.
All of that side of things. That's all right. Go and listen to it. If you haven't listened to it, go and listen to it, because I think it's so philosophical and it's so reflective of us as human beings that we almost do ourselves a disservice when we look at things as failure. So with Lily Garland, was I done with her? I don't know. Had I achieved everything I'd set out to achieve? No. I had unwritten songs. I had, recordings that were kind of half finished. So in theory, you could say that I had unfinished business and that I failed at that. But actually it didn't serve me anymore, and I made a conscious decision to say, no, I'm going to focus on the festival, I'm going to focus on the female creative, I'm going to find my identity and my sense of belonging through these other projects and these other experiences. And now, I actually went back in the studio 3 weeks ago. I've been asked to guest vocal on a track. And actually at the same studio that I recorded my first EP, Time to Fly, with Lily Garland. And I didn't know how I felt, but I felt really empowered going back into that space as me. I wasn't Lily Garland. I wasn't putting on an act. I was coming back and I was choosing to be part of that song, because I could have said no. And it felt great to play, to have fun without thinking about having to connect it back to a previous piece of me that was entrenched in so much trauma. So, it doesn't mean we can't revisit things. It doesn't mean that we can't pick up something that we put down before. It's not about going backwards, but it's about making that conscious choice of, is this still serving me? Is this relationship still serving me? Whether that relationship be with a person, with a thing, with a project, with a passion. And if it's not, you go, okay, I'm gonna leave that behind. That doesn't mean I'm going to ignore it. I'm going to diminish it. It's just not for me right now. And that to me has been a real light bulb of, I get to choose. And will I perform again? I don't know. Will I write my own country music again? I don't know. Right now, I'm too busy creating that community and that space for others. I feel belonging by creating a space for others to belong. That's my purpose in life, is to create spaces for people. And so, I don't know, the singing might come back or it might not.
I feel really emotional because I was, I haven't told you this, but I actually wrote your name down as somebody that I absolutely wanted to sort of reach out to, because of the fact that because you have created this space that I can go to once a year, or that feels like a little bit of Nashville. And that's just going back to all the things we did before. But what I'm really feeling emotional about is listening to everything that you've just said in the last part of this episode, which was very empowering and inspirational. And I'm just so grateful for you sharing that. And I've seen you with your amazing husband and children at the festival, and I've never met him, but he looks like an incredibly lovely man and very supportive as you're running around with your clipboard and at the festival. So I'm so happy the way that your journey is going and everything that you've come through, and the fact that you are creating a community is just amazing. And I'm not sure you probably realise just how many people you are helping, but here is one of them. I've got my hand up. Hannah, thank you.
And
no, please go on. Please go on.
I was to say, I think it's it's just so. We're the source of people that it's so nice when you hear other people appreciate what you've done. And I think, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. Thank you for kind of giving me the space to talk about these things, because like you say, we're all on this journey. It's all part of our own journey. But if we can say something that resonates with somebody else, whether you're a country music fan or not, and if you're not a country music fan, still come to Country on the Coast, because we can convert you. But even if you're not a country music fan, oh my gosh, the Jack Daniels. But yeah, there's I think it's so important to be able to be open and share, and that still is part of my journey, and I think part of your journey and creating this podcast and having these conversations is because we are in a position where we can share some of the things that we've been through. Our journey's not over. We're going to continue going through things, but I think that's why it's so important to have these sorts of platforms. So thank you for creating a space where people belong as well.
Oh, feeling all the love today. I want to put my country music hat on. Love it. So where can everybody find you? I'm sure people are going to really want to reach out after listening to this episode. Where's the best place? I know you run. I didn't mention your radio show. I'm sorry. Please tell everybody about that. And
that's okay.
Where's the best place to find you?
Another thing.
The
best place to find me. Yeah, another thing. The best place to find me is my Instagram, _female creative, and my website, www.thefemalecreative.co.uk, because that's kind of the front door to everything. So I host a radio show on Express FM every Wednesday, 7 till 9, where I play, again, not just the well-known country stuff, but I really do focus on independent country artists from the UK, because our UK talent is insane, as well as then internationally and artist interviews and various things like that. So have a little look at that. There's a variety of different Instagram accounts, but check out Country on the Coast UK, because that's where all the country music stuff is. But yeah, The Female Creative is the main place. Come and find me, reach out in the DMs. I hold networking brunches for the Female Creative, where again, it's just about creating that community for female business owners. So there's so many different ways that I can help you connect with others, whether it be through country, whether it be through business, whether it be through the radio show. So yeah, The Female Creative on Instagram is the best place to come and find me.
Love it. That's brilliant. Thank you so much. I'll put it all in the show notes as well. But I think now it's a long episode, but it's well worth it. So thanks to everybody for tuning in to this episode of How to Belong. And here's to keeping on the journey, exploring our unique journeys of belonging, and we'll be back soon. Thank you.